Okay, folks, another day here working on the sawmill. I had a couple of things that I did yesterday that didn't really go to plan, but that's all right. Normally things don't. First of all, the control box down here, it's got all the hydraulic controls in it. I finally had to let that thing all the way down to the ground, and the reason why was not to get this pin out, but was to get the pin out of another piece of linkage that's going underneath here. But that's all right. I mean, I let it down to the ground very easily, and I don't think nothing came from it. One thing Wood-Mizer did that was good, they put enough wire inside the rail here to allow you to do that. If there was not enough wire there, oh my gosh, that would be a disaster. I don't know how you would ever get that pin out without cutting all the wires out of it. But anyway, that's fine. Neither here or there. We'll get through that. The other part was this pin right here. That pin is not coming out. I must digress something here. That pin is stuck in there because it's a lack of grease, and that is my fault. I totally own up to that. And let me tell you why it's like that. I greased this thing religiously when I first got it, and all of a sudden I started having grease fittings to pop out. And then the grease fittings that was in it, all of a sudden they stopped taking grease. And something that I didn't really realize it, and a lot of you probably don't realize it either, but those pressed in grease fittings, the hole that they press them in is not as big as the hole that a tapped grease fitting goes in. And the reason why I know that is because I'm drilling out the pressed in holes to tap it. So, and it's drilling out metal. So that hole is not as big as one that's tapped. If a grease fitting has a small hole, it's going to be the very, very little bit of any kind of debris, or if you don't grease it as often as you should, that grease is going to get hard in there and it's going to stop it up. And so that's what happened on a lot of the other fittings. They wouldn't take grease. So I knew I was going to have to do this job. That's why I hadn't worried about it. If I didn't think it was important, I wouldn't be taking 3 days to tear all this out and try to repair it. If you got one of these mills, the LT70 and the LT50 has both, the bed, the frame is the same on both those mills. That's the two mills that I've had. If you got either one and you're having problems with those grease fittings, or you're watching this video and you think, man, I ought to do that, then this video will help you do that. And if you watch the video, it's not going to take you 3 days. If you started early on it one morning and you pulled all this apart, and especially if you had somebody to help, you could get it done in a day. And it's taken me a lot longer because I'm videotaping it for you guys. But it's well worth it. I enjoy doing this. But like I said, if I didn't care about it, I wouldn't be taking the time to do it. So I like to keep my equipment in best shape as I can. I totally believe in maintenance. I totally believe in greasing things. And but sometimes when the man's knocking at the door wanting to be paid for your electrical bill or your rent or mortgage or groceries or whatever, some kind of little pin that doesn't get greased becomes very insignificant very fast. And I'm sure a lot of you understand what I'm saying there. But anyway, with that said, the pin that I just showed you is stuck. I beat on it, I frailed on it, I drove chisels in behind it, and I can get it to turn, I can get it to pull out by an inch, but that's it. So it's stuck in there. So the only thing I can do is I'm going to have to heat the bracket that's around that pin and try to get enough expansion going in there to where I can get that pin on out. Now it's going to cook the paint on it. I know that. I've got a gallon of paint sitting right there. Well, I thought it was right there. I guess it's still on the golf cart. Yeah, it's right over there. I got a gallon of paint that I'm going to go around and paint a lot of these places on my mill, especially the ones where I've had to repair and prime it. But I can paint it back. It's all right. That's not a big deal. But the biggest deal is get the pin out and get it fixed. I need to get back to sawing. One of these days we're going to have a sawing video. So let's get the torch over here, get that fired up, get it hot, get the pin out. All right, if the picture looks a little bit fuzzy or blurry, I apologize. One of the lenses on my phone, the glass is broke in it, and the camera's not the best, so that's the best I could do. But anyway, getting my tools where I can get them in easy proximity. I'm gonna be heating this right in here. And when you're getting pins out, you always want to heat whatever is on the outside. You don't want to heat the pin, because if you heat the pin, you're just gonna make it tighter. You're going to expand the pin. You want to heat what's on the outside. It's probably gonna set the old grease on fire, so it's all right. At least we ain't got no sawdust in here to worry about. We're just gonna go down and try to heat it up evenly as much as I can. It'll take a few minutes. Just don't rush it. It's getting hot. I can feel the heat on my arm. All right. Let's see if we made any progress with that. Still pretty tight. May have to heat it some more. Let's heat it some more. Man, that thing right there is blistering. It's hot. there's another trick I can do to this. I don't want to do it if I can help it. And that's called a quench. I can heat that like that and then pour water on it. And that sudden temperature change will break the two pieces of metal apart. The reason why I do not want to do that is because it makes the steel hard. And when you go to drill for the new grease fitting and tap it, it's going to make it very difficult. But I may have to do that before it's over with. Because that right there is not coming out. I can't tell if that come out any or not. It kind of felt like it might have, but I can't tell by looking at it over here. Man, that is in there. Golly, I don't know why it's in there so tight. Let's see. We're gonna try it this time. If it don't come out this time, we're gonna go get some water and do the quench trick. And it ain't coming out. I cannot believe that's still in there that tight. Well, let's go get some water. In order for this little trick to work, you've got to get this thing in here as hot as you possibly can. Cherry red would be the idea. So I put on my rosebud. This will get it hotter faster than the acetylene or the normal cutting torch tip will. Somewhere in the 150 video clips I've made on this series, I told you to never do what I'm getting ready to do. I told you to never get metal real red hot and then cool it real fast because it makes it brittle. It does. That's not a lie. It does. This is a last resort. And there's an old saying, do as I say, not as I do. And that holds true with this. So I got me a bucket of water right here. The only other issue with this, the floor in here is dirt. So when I pour this water on this, it's going to make a mud hole right where I need to work. But I've worked in mud holes for the last 6 years with this thing, so that don't really make no difference. Let's see if we can get this lit. Yeah, boy. I had to get her hot and hurry. And it's a little easier to get it in there too. That's why you need backfire preventers right there. Anyway, let's get this cooled off, see what happens. What happened with that cutting torch, that rosebud scares me anyway. I've had that to happen a lot. And what it's doing, it's actually backfiring in the rosebud itself. It's setting the acetylene on fire up in it. And those two things on the end of the torch is called backfire preventers. That keeps it from going up into the line. Now let's see here. Man, that's hot. I can't put my hand on that, it's so hot. Where is that darn crowbar? Yeah, it ain't gonna come out. I'm gonna have to think of something else to do. Golly, that blows me away. Well, folks, I've got it moving a little bit. I stopped the camera for a few minutes, and basically I just kept beating on it around and around and around. Now I'm gonna say one thing right here. Actually, I'm gonna say two things. I'll clean this up and I'll paint this back and it'll all look fine, so don't worry about that. But as aggravating as I've had broken welds with this sawmill, that's a good weld. I have beat and beat and beat and beat on that thing. I beat so much on, I take a grinder and clean it up and make it look presentable again. But that's the way a weld's supposed to hold. But anyway, I'm going to say that quench trick worked. I just couldn't get it quite as hot as I wanted it. But I kept using that penetrating oil shooting it down into the grease where the grease fittings go, and I would hit this little flange down here and just get it going around and around and around. In one place it was really tight. I just kept beating it on around until I got it around it. But now I'm starting to get it to move a little bit. So I'm gonna tap it out a little bit till it gets to where it feels tight. Then I'm gonna shoot some more of that penetrating on those holes and drive the pin back. It may come all the way out now. I believe we got it, folks. Yeah, it's out now. Woo, Lord. I was sitting here thinking about this, and you know, I realize that everybody's beliefs are different. I realize that. I respect that. I'm not going to try to press my beliefs off on anyone. If somebody wants to know what they are, I'll be glad to tell them. But I'll tell you one thing real quick. Over there. That's going to fall, so I was trying to keep it from falling. That's still hot. My daddy, without getting into too much detail, my daddy chose a life that wasn't of a family man, say it like that. And I only saw him just a few times in my life. He died when he was 52 of cancer. I was 26 at the time. I'm 50 now, so it won't be long to where I'm the age that he died at. And that's kind of puts things in perspective. But anyway, one of the few times that I did see him in my life, he had this, I think it was his sister-in-law. I can't remember her name. But she was, she claimed to be a Christian, but, you know, sometimes that's not true what people claim. But when something wasn't working right, she'd start spouting out, "Get out of that thing, demon. Get out of that thing, demon." Well, I was here working and the camera wasn't recording. And that memory popped through my head. I said in my head, "Get out of here, demon." And as soon as I did, I took that crowbar right there and put against it and pried, and that thing moved about a ½ inch. So, guys, you believe what you want to believe. I believe that there's a good Lord in heaven that watches out for us. And I've had some tough times in my life. I went through some tough stuff, and I'm getting way off subject right here. Sometimes the best conversations come at the times that we least expect it. That's what's happened to me before. And a lot of times it comes from working on equipment and doing stuff like this. But anyway, I've had some tough times in my life, and at some points I've even questioned God as to if he created me, did he create me just to watch me have hard times, watch me suffer? And you know, I go through some periods like that sometimes. I think being a Christian is not about getting saved, and which, I mean, getting saved is the main thing, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, but it's more than that. It's a process. It's a relationship. It's just like having a relationship. If you're a man watching this video with your wife or girlfriend or whatever, if you're a lady, you have a relationship with your husband or boyfriend. But you have to work at it, and you there's going to be times that you're going to question things, and I think that God really intends that. I really do. I don't think that he expects us to come to him every time and put on the rose-colored glasses and thank him for everything that's great in our lives when knowing in our heart that things aren't great. That's almost like lying. I think he wants us to be more honest about things. And anyway, I've had situations like this right here. This is not the first time that what I just told you has happened. I had a dozer one time I was working on underneath of it. And anybody who's ever worked on equipment, you've never worked on anything as hard as crawling underneath a bulldozer in between the tracks, and you don't have no room hardly. And I'm a big guy. I couldn't even roll over on my side. But I was trying to put a pump in it for the steering clutches. And I worked and worked and worked, and it was hot, and I was about sick on my stomach, and I finally just stopped, and I prayed, and I said, Lord, please help me. I need your help. I need you to help me get this in. And as soon as I said, in Jesus' name, amen, I picked that pump up, and it slid right into place and never even touched the frame, just like it was meant to happen. I think that's what God asks us. I think that's what he wants us to do. He wants to get us to the point to where we can't do anything else. And then that's when he can really help us. But I'm sorry. Well, no, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry a bit for getting off on topic. And, you know, I don't mean to offend anyone by saying all that, but if you're offended, I'll pray for you. But anyway, now you can see that pin, how much it's been beat on. And that is no more than just neglect right there. Like I told you, on my behalf, it's got rust on it. It needs to be cleaned up. It's where the mill has sat out in the rain and it hadn't been greased, and just a lot of things going on with that right there. But it's out. Now we can move forward. Okay, folks, I'm back up here at the junked up shed, garage, whatever you want to call it. And this is what I was telling you about a few minutes ago. The hole right here, which still has a little bit of the grease fit and stuff left down in it. You can see it. You can see just that little bit of that grease fitting. But the diameter of the hole is far, far less than the diameter of the hole over here. See the difference? And I haven't even tapped this hole. It's just been drilled. I still got to tap it. But that's what I'm talking about. See how small that hole is? And any kind of debris or anything, and even cheap grease. I mean, some grease dries out really quick. I'm going to make a comment here. I'm going to make somebody mad. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make anybody mad. I'm just telling you what my experiences is or are. I'm a fan of Lucas stuff. I got Lucas stuff right there. I got Lucas stuff right there. And I'm sure if you look in this junked up place, there's something else that's Lucas in here. I used to use that red and tacky Lucas grease and everything. Well, got to where when I'd leave my grease gun laying somewhere, I got this red pool of watery stuff that would come out of it. Like if I hung the grease gun on something and the hose was pointing toward the ground, there'd be like a red puddle. It wasn't grease, but it was just like a oil. And I was wondering, well, why is that doing that? I don't ever have any other grease to do that. Well, I started reading some things about it, and people would say that Lucas, that red and tacky, would separate. And I don't know if that's true, but by golly, something happened, because every time I would go get my grease gun, there'd be a mess in the floor. So I stopped using it. And if that's the case, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying if that grease has something in it that separates, and you shoot it in a little bitty porthole like that, and if it does what it did in my grease gun, the stuff that keeps it thin enough to get in and lubricate drips out or comes out through the end of the tube, And the rest of the grease, or whatever it is, it's more of a hard, it just doesn't feel like grease. It will stay in there, and then it gets hard, and it hardens up, and that's what's going to stop these ports up. Again, I don't mean to make anybody mad. I'm sure somebody's going to say something in the comments, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with people voicing their opinions. I'm voicing mine. You know what they say opinions are. Everybody's got one, and they all stink. But I think it's better to have a bigger hole. In fact, on my tractor, I used to have this problem a lot on my front end loader. And I said the other day my tractor never given me any problems, and it hasn't. But I used to have issues with every time I go to grease it, and I grease it every 20 hours, something like that, 25 hours, I'd have grease fittings that wouldn't take grease. And the reason why is the pin that went in through the loader arm or whatever, it didn't have nowhere for the grease to go. So when I bought my lathe, that's the first job I did. I took all the pins out of the loader, and wherever that pin ended up over the grease port, I cut a groove in it. I cut a groove in it that way, and I also cut some grooves in it long ways. So it gives that grease somewhere to go in there and spread out. And in big equipment, in high dollar stuff, the pins have a I don't know what you would call it, but it's maybe a helix, I guess. It's a groove cut. It looks like a big thread going down the pin. And that's what it's made for. It's made so when you shoot grease in these holes, it gets in that little groove and it spreads it all the way down the pin. But anyway, I wanted to show that to you. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to drill this one out. We're going to start tapping this. I'll clean all this up. I got the pins over here. I'm probably going to take that pin that gave us such a hard time down to the lathe, chuck it in the lathe, and clean it up a little bit. Well, I started drilling this out. I wanted to stop just a minute. Thankfully, when I heated this and quenched it, it didn't harden it to the point where I can't drill it. So I can still drill it. It may be a little harder than it used to be, but I can deal with it. So I'm gonna get this drilled out. I keep stopping what I'm doing because I find something I want to show you guys. I started drilling this out, and I drilled down through that old grease fitting that was in there. So what you're seeing there, the inner diameter of the hole is the size that was put there by Wood-Mizer, and the outer diameter of that hole is what I'm drilling it out to. So right there is a pristine, clear picture of what I'm talking about. These holes are real small. You ever see a wrench that small? That was in all those wrenches that I bought from my buddy Chris. I told you I bought 3 boxes worth of tools, wrenches, and sockets. That was in there, and I thought, what in the world would anybody use that for? Fits it like a champ. I can't get a die in there for hitting that. I'm sure they make something that will clamp onto these that you can put on a ratchet, but I don't have one, so I'm going to use the world's tiniest wrench. Okay, folks, I've got this one pin that gives us such a hard time getting out. I've got it in the lathe here, and I'm going to hold the foam with one hand and take a piece of emery cloth and just clean up as much of that as I can. I can't get over here where it's chucked in the lathe, and I could put a 4-jaw chuck on it and chuck this in there, but that'd be a time-consuming process getting it dialed in enough to where it would actually turn halfway true. So we're just going to do it like this, and I'll clean the end of it up right here when it's on the vise. Sorry, I left my tripod at the shed. Just going to try to get some of that old grease off of it. Try and do it like this. Okay, now we're in business. Now we're in business. my fingers around away from the chuck. I'm gonna tell you what. This lathe right here, it's wore out. It needs to be restored. Down here at right there at the ways up next to that chuck, it's wore about 2/1000ths. So the bed needs to be, the headstock and everything needs to be taken off of the bed and take the bed somewhere and have it machined or scraped or something to try to get a little bit of that wear out of it. And the bearings is wore out in the pulley on the bottom, and it just needs to be restored. But I'm telling you what, this thing right here has been a lifesaver to me, as far as trying to fix parts and do the things that I have to do around here. If I hadn't had it, I don't know what I would have done. Sorry, I'm trying to put another piece of sandpaper on. I'm gonna push the button right here with my finger. See if I can get some of that old grease off that. Probably gonna have to take a little brake clean to it. Let's do that. Now, folks, we're starting to see the whole story behind this pin that gives such a fit to get out. If you look at all that pitting on that. And what that comes from is water. And if you watch one of my other videos where I work on my mom's Cadet lawnmower, talk about bearings and water. What's happened, water's got in that, and it's pitted it. And when it pitted, like these little indentions here at my finger, that raises the metal up. So what it does, it basically, in a way, kind of welds itself in the tube. Without welding it, it's just connected by rust. And that's why it was so hard to get this thing out. Once you get on out here to the end, and believe it or not, it's kind of odd. You'd think it'd be pitted worse on the ends where rust could, or water could penetrate it, but it's not. This is inside the tube. So I guess water was getting in there and couldn't get out. And that's just another thing about leaving your equipment outside. Guys, first of all, let me apologize for the grease on my hands. If you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, you're going to get greasy hands. This is that little old shortened pin that I was telling you about on the other one, where I welded that 1/4 nut right on the top of it right there and threaded it. And this is that hardened steel. You can't drill it, you can't tap it. Now, I thought, you can't see it on this one. Yeah, you can right in there just a little bit. Look down that hole. It almost looks like there's threads in that. And I thought on that other one there was. I thought that grease fitting was a threaded fitting. And I thought that what they did, they machined this out, drilled it, and threaded it before they hardened it. Well, I was wrong. This is using, and I've got it laying right here somewhere. Oh, here we go. This is using one of those pressed in grease fittings. And I mean, it doesn't take anything to push it in or pull it out. I mean, so for the sake of time, and this is a very easy part to get off, I'm gonna go ahead and push this grease fitting back in, because I need to get this done. And if it pushes the grease fitting out in the future, I can weld me another nut on the top and tap it and put a real grease fitting in it at that point. But I just wanted to make that clarification that these had pressed in fittings as well. I'd like to try to hold these two fittings up if I could and let you see the difference. I'm sorry. Now, the hole coming out of the fitting is the same size. That's not what the important part is. It's the hole in that. And that hole in that is much smaller than a threaded fitting. But that right there is the difference in a pressed in and a threaded fitting. One thing that gives it away is that collar right there. There's nowhere to get a wrench on it. And these fittings are very soft. They're easy to break. They have to be soft because if you put a real hard grease fitting in that hardened steel, you'd never get it in there. Something's got to give. And in this case, it's the grease fitting. So I'm going to put this one back in. I took it out, cleaned all the holes out. So it's good and clean. It should take grease fine. But if it gets to the point where it gets hard to take grease, as soon as you shoot grease in there, this fitting's going to pop out. And at that point, I'll have to take this pin out, weld a nut on it, and fix it right. All right, this is the pin that was so hard to get out, and this was the boogered up end on it. I took it and ground it, polished it up a little bit, made it look a little bit more presentable. So now I'm going to start painting. I also took this part, when we had to heat up so bad, you know, so hot. Shouldn't say so bad, so hot. Sorry about that. Hope my English teacher's not watching. And I'm getting ready to start primering it as well. All right, folks, this is the pin that I had to beat on so much to get it to come out. Got it ground and painted and ready to go back. Now I'm getting ready to paint this. I've had this paint for a while. It's this magic tractor and implement paint that you get at Tractor Supply. So kind of going to be doing a review on that too. We'll see how it goes. Now I haven't shaken this paint up or anything. It's been sitting out here in the junked up shop since last fall. So let's see what it looks like. Yep, that looks like Kubota orange to me. And I think Wood Miser orange was, well, it's not Kubota orange, it's Alice Chandler orange, I think. Yep, Alice Chandler orange. And I think it'll be good enough to match the Wood Miser too. Wow. That paint don't even look like it's even separated. Now, the top of the can looks bad because it's set out here during the winter and got moisture on top of the lid and sort of rusted it, but it's all right. But I figured that would not be anywhere near that that mixed up. And I'm just gonna paint this with a brush. It'll have a better paint job on it now than it did when it was new. All right, I got my paint mixed up. Let's start painting. It's really windy out here right now, so more likely this is going to dry really fast, which that's good. Oh, ain't it pretty? Nothing like something that's newly painted. I know it may have a brush stroke or two in it, but it really doesn't matter. All I'm wanting to do is to make sure it doesn't rust. And that primer I used is self-etching primer. I like self-etching primer. I know some people don't really care for it. I like it because if you got something that's got paint on it already, and this is a very cheap brush. If you got something that's got paint on it already and some bare spots, I feel like that self-etching primer will kind of bite into all of it and sort of hold it together. I'll have to paint it, let it dry, and turn it over another way and paint it. This thing's hard to hold. It's like trying to hold a barrel full of cats with one arm. Now, more than likely, gravity's going to do that funny thing here in a few minutes, and it's going to fall on the ground. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I have this little joke about how something about my property here is a gravitational phenomenon. It doesn't make any difference what you got, how heavy it is, where it's at, don't make no difference. It falls on the ground. One thing about it, this paint's thick, so it ain't thin like what comes from the factory. If you guys got these meals, if you've got problems with the paint on your meal, shoot me a comment. I'd like to know if you're running into the same issues that I'm running into. It would take a long time to do it, but at some point I'll probably have to have my meal painted, which it's in the shoulder now. It's not going to go downhill like it has so far, but you know, I feel like if the paint job's good on something, it helps its value. One sense. In another sense, if you're buying and used equipment, a lot of times people don't want to see it fresh painted. They want to see what it looks like, how it's been taken care of. The paint job kind of gives them an indication of that. If they look at the paint job on that sawmill of mine, they're going to think, man, he's neglected the heck out of it. And again, I guess you could say I have in a way, because I haven't had a place to park it in the dry. But mechanically, other than these grease fittings, it's very, very good shape. I have, now if I get a little paint down in these holes, I'll run the tap down there and chase it out. But getting back to the sawmill, I've kept the oil changed in it and stuff like that. Some people, like I started to say, if they're buying used equipment, when if they see something that's been freshly painted, a lot of times it turns them off. I can understand. All right, while that part up there dries, I'm taking a few minutes to clean up some of this. This is just some orange paint I had. It don't really match this, so I'm gonna take the time to paint this and paint the stop that broke twice. I know it's a lot brighter than what the old wood miser paint was, but that's because it set out in the weather. But this right here will probably fade too eventually. It'll look a little better. I think I already talked about this in one of the other 500 clips on this series. I relocated this light. It used to be right here, and I tore it off on the 50, and I tore it off on this one because when you're loading big logs, and if the log has got what we call a bell on the bottom of it, like a swelled up end on it. It's big, real big around on the big end. When you're loading it, that end will catch that light right there and just bend the heck out of it. And so I mounted it back here to get it back behind this, so maybe that would sort of protect it a little bit. And as far as I know, I hadn't damaged it one time since. Old Magic paint, it's thick, it's pretty good stuff. It's not bad. Now, I mean, you wouldn't want to paint a show tractor like this, but it seems to lay down all right. If I was painting the sawmill, the whole thing, this is not how I would do it. I would get a paint match, go get me a good quality automotive paint and hardener, and you know, what they call it, three part, I can't remember. It's you buy the paint, the hardener, base coat, clear coat. That's what I'm trying to think of. And clear coat. But my goodness, it's a sawmill. I want to take care of it the best I can, but I mean, I'm not going to sit around and fret over it and just be to the extreme of it. I'm going to use it to make money and take the best care of it I can. And you know, if you took your time, if I had a better brush, you could paint the whole thing like this and it wouldn't look bad. I mean, from 30 feet, you wouldn't even be able to tell it. And this is a heck of a lot better paint job doing it like this than what's already on it. I got to noticing, I may have mentioned this, if I did, I'm sorry. I got to noticing about the paint though. It seems like the worst places is, and I know some of this is a little dirty, so don't cringe, guys. It's just a dang sawmill. I know, I noticed that the paint from Wood Miser that flakes off the worst happens right around the edges. So those of you out there who paint and paint cars and that kind of stuff, why does it do that? Why is it that it just happens right at the edge and you can just lift it up? You know, when you're handling it, your fingers will actually pull it off. Why is that? If you know, tell me in the comments, because I don't know if it's they're not putting hardener in it, or I suspect they're mixing the paint so thin just to conserve paint, trying to make it go further. This is a pin that I made. I drilled a hole through a grade 8 bolt. Now, you talking about hard to drill, that was hard to drill. But those little pins that comes in this, if you pull this thing up much of a heel, you're going to bend that pin. I've bent several of them. I have learned when you're painting something like this, if you're using real thick paint, the best method is really not to brush it, just kind of dab it. And what it'll do, it will level out better. You know, if you got a lot of area to cover, you know, brushing it makes better sense. Sometime maybe this fall, I usually take about 2 times a year and do stuff like this, but maybe sometime this fall, I'm going to rebuild these bunks. And the reason why, maybe the camera's over here, I can't remember where it's pointed at. The reason why, when you're sawing, these get sawdust on top of them. And I'm constantly having to walk down there and brush the sawdust off. And so I had some stainless steel bent in the shape of like a pyramid. And I'm going to remake the bunks and put these pyramid caps on it. And what that will do the sawdust will be less likely to sit there. You know, it'll want to fall off each side of the cap. Maybe save me a few steps. Now the wood miser, the production wood miser mills, the ones especially made overseas, they're already like that. Not real sure why they don't do that on these. Another thing I'll speak to while I'm here painting, these mills, I feel like, have way too much adjustment in these bunks. I mean, if you think about it, this thing's put on a jig when the frame is welded up. And jigs, wood miser in the United States is in Indiana. And Indiana gets cold in the winter. They're probably a climate controlled factory where they're building these things. But jigs, when it gets real cold, the cold will affect them. It will make them draw a certain way. And so a frame that is welded up in the winter could slightly be, now I'm not talking much, I'm talking just slightly, could slightly be off a little bit than what it was welded in the summer, if it's not welded in like a climate controlled environment, but I'm sure wood miser is. Going back to what I said a second ago though, there's way too much adjustment in here. If this frame right here, it comes around and drops down there at the axle, then steps back up. If the cross members, these, is welded to this frame evenly, they're flush out here, but out there, this frame steps down 4 inches, and these cross members here that are out there are sitting down on top of this. And I'll show y'all when they do it, but if this frame is all welded up right, why do you need all this adjustment? Now I realize you need 2 inches in here, or 1.5 inches or whatever. I don't see why you need all this adjustment. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in and cut, and I already did it on place to cut some square tubing and put in here and push these down, and I'm gonna weld them in, because what will happen over time, these things will get off, they get loose, the tractor comes here and catches it, picks it up, you don't know it, then your lumber's off, and then you're trying to scratch your head and figure out why. These sawmills saw good lumber, but you know, it's a rough sawn thing. It's not a finished product, it's rough sawn. If it's off just a little bit, that's fine. I think a lot of people's got the impression that these things saw, are supposed to saw like a planer. And even though they cut good, they do, they cut true to be what they are. They cut really true. They're not a planer, they're a sawmill. It's a rough product. All right, got that painted. That's looking pretty good. I might come back and touch it again here and there. Now let's go right here and we'll do a little bit. I'm gonna paint right around this stop that I took off, and then we'll go over here and paint, sorry about that, we'll go over here and paint this. Okay folks, a lot has happened since the last time we talked about these grease fittings and I started recording again. It's been raining like crazy for the past few days, and the day that I come in and put the hydraulic box back in and put that part right there back in, gosh, it was raining so hard out here you couldn't hear yourself think, much less try to make a video. I mean, that's like a big drum. I was so thankful though I could come out here and work and be out of the weather. That's a blessing. But let me go over a couple things and what happens. Okay, got the meal head back here, is kind of in the way. I'm working on something else now, but on these grease fittings, I had a video and somehow I've lost it. And it was probably the most important, one of the most important clips of this whole series, because it showed some struggles and things that I had to do. But I lost it. I don't know what happened to it. The phone didn't record it or what. But anyway, I'm going to tell you what happened. If you watched me, I come in and drilled these holes for these grease fittings in this bracket. And drilling it was okay. It wasn't a big issue. But when I went to tap them, I put the tap in that back hole right there. And I started tapping it, and I was easy with it. I was just taking my time, being easy with it. Broke the tip of the tap off in that hole. That presented a huge problem. How do you get it out? Well, I come in here and I beat and tried to chisel it out, and I couldn't get it out. And so, you know, I was kind of like, well, that's not a really big deal. I'll just let it go. So then, I moved up to this one. This is the one at that hydraulic box. This is the one we had to heat to get it out. And I tapped these holes, and that's when I put the grease fittings in it. And when you saw in that clip where I said, well, it's not going to work because grease is coming out, it wasn't taking grease. So after all that, I decided to back up, and that's what made me decide to go ahead and take these things out. And when I did, I took that bracket right there home to my house where the welder is, and I just built up a bead on top of that tap and took a pair of vice grips and twisted it out. And when I had the bracket out, which is the same bracket as this one, or close to it, I went ahead and drilled and tapped it all out. So when I took this one out, I went ahead and drilled and tapped it. I had to put a bigger fitting in right here. For some reason, that hole, I guess it's just where I was drilling it and trying to tap it. I couldn't get a standard grease fitting to stay in it, so I had to go up to a 3/8 pipe thread. But it's in there. Right here's that cylinder I was talking about earlier that did not have a grease fitting in it. I drilled it, put a grease fitting in that. I put a grease fitting here on this one. The grease fitting, actually, well, I guess that's the same hole. The one on the back has it in the side, and it was really hard to get to. So I got that. I come in and I painted it. Just brushed on some paint. I got Tractor Supply. It's like Alice Chandler Orange. It matches okay. I mean, my meal's set out in the weather, and it's faded out. And heck, after I saw a few logs on it and gets dust on it, it ain't gonna make no difference. But I wanted to show you that I did paint it. I painted the frame. I painted the stop. I went ahead and tried to paint all this that I could. I come into the hydraulic box here. I got 99% of the dust out of it that had accumulated in it. It was really clean anyway. It just cleaned it up, you know, absolutely as best as I could. For you LT70 owners out there, I'm going to show you something that you may or may not know. I didn't know it, but there's fuses right there. See those two fuses? A 10 amp and a 15 amp. I did not know those fuses was there. So if you have lost bed control functions or you're having issues with that, check those two fuses. I still got one grease fitting I need to change, and that's this one over here at the turner. And again, I don't know, the grease fitting is on the bottom of that. You can't even see it. And when you raise the turner up, it even makes it worse. It's completely on the bottom, so I'm gonna fix that. I got a couple of fittings out here that wouldn't take grease. And this is why I don't like that lock and lube coupler. And I've got a rebuild kit, and that might be what the problem is. I use that Milwaukee electric grease gun on it, and it may build so much pressure up, it's blowing the seals out of that little grease coupler. So I'm gonna try to rebuild it, but just as soon as it gets any kind of resistance, the grease pours out of it. And that, man, you add all that up, look how much I've wiped on the back of that tire. You add all that up, that's a lot of grease that I'm wasting. So those are easy. I knock that pin out, take them out, and re-drill and tap them. I probably won't show that just because there's so much video of fixing these grease fittings already. Up here, I painted this frame that I built. This is where all those threaded rods and mess was. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video on the service work for the LT70. We got a rainy day here down at the mill shed, but we have took the time. I've been working on about 2 weeks on and off, believe it or not. I took the time to do this service work and to try to get everything fixed that I've been needing to get fixed. If you got equipment, sometimes you just got to take the time to do that. It's very important to maintain your equipment. It's very important if you have some kind of an issue to pop up that you're like, I don't know what this means. It's like a check engine light on a car. A lot of times a check engine light will come on in a car and people will drive the car around for years. And I have known, I heard a story one time of a guy, he got tired of looking at the check engine light, so he took the dash out and took the bulb out of it. You know, that's not a fix. But maintain your equipment. My mill is 2021. Unfortunately, it's had to sit out in the rain just like this right here its whole life. My other mill, it was a 2017. It did the same thing. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel, and even more importantly than that, share it. You know, the audience that's going to be watching this, I know, is probably interested in fixing things and maybe sawmills, and there's 1,000 different sawmill videos out now. It's amazing. When I was young working in the woods, everybody made fun of you if you like sawmills. Now everybody likes sawmills, so it's just the way things have gone. But anyway, thank you for watching. I really enjoy doing the videos. I enjoy helping people to learn. I like learning myself, and I don't know everything. I'll be the first to tell you, I learn something new every day, and that's what the great thing is about this. But again, thank you for watching. Subscribe, thumbs up, share, and go get out and fix something. Have a nice day.